Hello, everybody. Welcome to the D. Louise book series. I'm Christina, Kristina. This is where we read books, talk about books. I'm a serious person. There's no special effects going on here. I wish I was a little bit better, but I'm not. And I'm a serious person. I like to read series. I like to read about the character's progression from book to book to book. And like with Star Trek, we solve a thing each episode, but we do have character progression throughout the seasons. So we are up to disc 4, season 4, episode 188, Clues. And before I get started, I have a miracle request from y'all. Y'all are the only ones that can do it. So I'm hoping that y'all be able to come through for me. I'm hoping for a Christmas miracle because there isn't anybody else to do this but you. But I'm hoping for 1,000 subscribers. Wouldn't that be awesome? Those 140 something of you, I appreciate it every day. But I need 900 more. So if you have a channel, spread the word. You have a page, spread the word. Get it out there, get it going. Because I can't do it. It's just me. There isn't anybody else. Sorry for my low technology, my horrible sound, my audio video. Everything's bad. But hey, it's just me. There isn't anybody else. There isn't any talent here. It's just me. And like I said, we are up to season 4, disc 4, episode 188, Clues. Last week we did Devil's Due. This week we're doing Clues. And I tell you, I cannot wait. This is going to be a very, very long podcast. If I could do it live, I would. But I am fear of copyright issues. They take me down instantly. Because I don't think you can play Star Trek, publicly type thing. So it's going to be a great episode. I'm going to go through it. I've got so many questions. It's going to be awesome. Jeffrey, Mr. Cochran, and his drinking, and the Vulcans, and the Borg. Always exciting. Let's see if our Borg ship is any better. Remember the last time we did the Borg ship, I itched and bitched about the fact how clean the ship was. It didn't look like anything of 7 of 9's Borg ship. So we'll have to see what's up with that, shall we? But right now, we got to do Clues. And it's interesting, they start off on the Holo deck. It should have been Sherlock Holmes and Data, but it wasn't. But anyways. So, just a sec. So we start off with a captain's voiceover. Early completion of our mission at Heracus 5 has allowed me to grant extra personal time for many of the crew. This has come as something as a relief since our recent tight scheduling has prevented the pursuit of the leisure activities that are a normal part of life aboard the Enterprise. I expect our journey past the Endgame Nebula to be uneventful, and I am personally using the time to fulfill a promise to a colleague. And it happens to be Guinan. This was the one view that showed both of them. I have this pet peeve, you've heard me say it before, when there's two people having a conversation, the conversation goes in one face, then the other face, then the one face, then the other face. And I would like in between maybe pauses to get a group shot so you can see both parties in the room. But, so anyways, this is the group shot for this one. So Guinan walks in. She's doing a really good job. I love Whoopi Goldberg. She's the best. The secretary, she plays the 40s type secretary to it. She does real good. Guinan walks in. Dixion Hill around. Madeline says she's occupied at the present moment. Guinan says, tell him Gloria's here. Madeline says, can't do that. He doesn't want to be disturbed. Guinan says, tell him it's Gloria from Cleveland. Stick with that. Madeline says, doesn't matter if you're from the moon, hun. Mr. Hill is incumino. Guinan says, incumcado. That's it. Sorry, hun. Listen, hun. Just tell him Gloria's here. Madeline says, when the boss doesn't want to be disturbed, the boss doesn't want to be disturbed. Don't take it personal like. Guinan says, I have an appointment with Mr. Hill at 2 o'clock. She looks at the clock. She says it's 2:10. So I had a little trouble getting into this dress. It took me a while to figure out exactly what I was supposed to do with these. And she shows the garters. You know, in the olden days, you could use YouTube to figure that question out. Just a little thing there. I know a person who lives on learning how to do stuff via YouTube. So Madeline says, sorry, Dix, there's a lady here to see you. Says her name is Gloria. Gloria. From Cleveland. Madeline said, from Cleveland. Okay, he never heard of you. Guinan, he's never heard of me. Madeline's like, that's right. Oh, wait. I don't think you understand. You see, this was all been set up in advance, you see. I'm supposed to be Gloria from Cleveland, and I was supposed to be in Holodeck 4 at 2 o'clock, and you don't have any idea what I'm talking about, do you? Not to worry. And she goes in the office. And she's like, hey, you can't go in there. Oops. Okay, I screwed this up a lot. So just bear with me. So she goes inside and the gunman says, who's the doll? Picard says, she's my cousin. Guinan says, Gloria from Cleveland. Picard says, sorry, Gloria. I didn't actually mean for you to get involved. She has nothing to do with this, Johnny. Guinan says, what does this mean? And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, right, I get it. Put the hands up. So the gunman's like, yeah, right, what do I look like, a jamoke? You ain't nobody's cousin, and you ain't here for a visit. What do you know about my money? And I had to look it up. It was slang for an ordinary, unimpressive, or inept person, typically used as a term of mild or joking disparagement for a man. Okay. Don't know. Your money, Guinan says. The gunman says, the money he stole, and he keeps pointing the gun. And we don't get a good look at the gunman till he's dead, but you stole his money? Picard says, don't listen to him, Gloria, he's lying. The gunman says, oh, Johnny, talk to me, Johnny, I'm a great listener. Gunman says, I'm finished with talking, sweetheart. Now I'm going to get some action or else. And Guinan says, and he goes by the window, and there's a drive-by shooter, and he gets shot. And so Guinan says, you do this for fun? And Picard says, it's a mystery, Guinan. Who was this man? Who killed him? Where's the money he was talking about? It's a mystery. Now we have to go search for clues. And that's fun? Picard says, that's fun. And he goes over to the window, and he says, a 48 Packer with white walls. I couldn't catch a license plate. And you hear Madeline in the outer office. Dixion Hill Private Investigations. Sorry, there's no Captain Picard here. Try down at the dock. And then Picard, he hears her, and he takes the phone call, and it's from Data. I wanted to take this opportunity to show my co-host, who's walking around like crazy, and the dead guy. I just thought I'd show. She doesn't get to be on these because I use a table for these. she would like me on the floor, and I have yet to figure out how to do that. But maybe one day we will do that. But right now, this is my co-host, and she's complaining because I'm not holding her on her terms. I'm holding her on my terms. And I've talked about how I want a cat. There are 2 types of cats. Yes, there are many breeds, but I'm not talking about that. There's 2 types of cat. There's an emotional support cat, and there's all the rest of the cats. An emotional support cat is the kind of cat that will come 100% of the time when you call them, will let you hold them for hours and hours, however long you want. Then there's the rest of the world cats that will come when they want to. They will allow you to hold them when they want to be held. See, 2 different kinds of cats. And I almost had a chance at one the other day, but usually if you get them from a rescue place, the rescue place gives them all their shots, make sure they're all spaded before they release them to you. This was going to be a feral farm cat who came with fleas, and there was no way I was going to have a cat in my house with fleas and expose the rest of the cats to the house and do all that bombing and shampooing and vacuuming, and I just wasn't, no. But I was tempted. I was very, very tempted. Because my emotional support cat, as you know, I was doing some of these Star Trek videos when he was dying in front of me, and there was nothing I could do. He had a brain tumor, and he was having seizures. And just an FYI, that be-all, end-all blood test that they charge you $350, $450 at the vet doesn't diagnose brain tumors. Just a heads up on that one. And another thing. This episode bothers the life out of me because they imply that Data is lying. I wish Data was able to say, look, sir, he says it. All right, he says it, but he doesn't say it till the very, 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 very end. If he'd said it up front, look, XYZ happened. I'm not allowed to tell you about it. You ordered me to do it. You had a good reason to order me to do it, and we need to leave it be. Because if you pursue it, then you're putting the lives of the crew in jeopardy. And we'll get to that too, because I have something to say about that. But we will get back to that later. So I don't like the fact that they're making Data seem like he's lying. And I am happy we get to see Whoopi Goldberg for a few minutes. And I am happy that we get to see Colin Meaney for a few minutes. And I have some other things to say about the bridge. I also wanted to mention that if they did the rewind of time back to this moment and had Data not make this phone call, he could have continued on the holodeck. People could have continued what they were doing. See, they should have flashed back a little further, but no. I know plot lines. I know it was the story. I'm just saying that if you could have looked at it this way and had them flash back just a little further, it would have solved all these problems. But then, of course, you wouldn't have this plot line. And, of course, they wanted to have this plot line. And I also wanted to mention that technically they did this for 2 days. So technically they lost 2 days. So, I mean, if they got back to Starfleet and they would go to Starfleet, my computer says Monday at 5 and yours says Wednesday at 5. Sorry, I'm just picking. It just occurred to me later on. I'll probably say it again. And I'm waiting for Betsy over there to go off. You know, every time I do a video, she goes off. She hasn't gone off yet. One of these days, I'm going to take her with a video with me, and she can go off in your face. Bong, bong, bong. And as you can tell, I still have not finished putting my decorations up. I have a tapestry that I put over the white cabinet. And I haven't gotten that far yet. I've been procrastinating. Really procrastinating. I just am not in the mood this year. It's a really sad time. I've lost quite a few people. So that's why we're doing our comfort readings, our J.D. Robb and our Janet Ivanovich. So you have to check those vids out too. I like my book vids. I hope you like my book vids. And I need likes and subscribers. I need a Christmas present. Please. Thank you. So, back to our story. Captain, it's Commander Data here. Please excuse the unusual interruption, but under the circumstances, I thought that patching communications to the holodeck program would be less intrusive. Picard says, I appreciate your concern, Commander Data. What can I do for you? Data says, long-range sensors have detected a T-Tauri-type star within a pocket of the NG cloud. Picard says, well, there's nothing unusual about that, sir. Data says, no, sir. However, this star's single planet falls within the M-class range. It is capable of supporting life. Picard says, now that is unusual. Data says, highly, sir. Picard says, well, thank you, Data. Procedures require us to investigate. Recall the bridge crew and set in a course. And he says to Whoopi Goldberg's Gloria captor, I am sorry, Gloria, but there is a 24th century mystery I have to investigate. You are very welcome to carry on if you would like. Guinan says, no, I've had enough fun for the day. And I'm just saying, if they had stopped Data from making that telephone call, it would... I know, then you wouldn't have had a plot line. I know. I'm picking at hairs here. Sorry. Now, I'm probably going to say this a half dozen times. There's a girl in Wesley Crusher's seat. Okay? Now, understand this. Wesley Crusher left. Okay? Then we had Ensign Allenby for a few episodes, and she talked. She had lines. She got to sit up front. She got to be seen. She wasn't just one of those passing down the hallway people or in the elevator people. She got to be seen. She got to be in the scene with the main cast. Not even backup crew, but with the main cast. Okay? And Ensign Allenby got a few episodes. Then we went a couple of episodes with guys. Those guys got 0 lines. They got to sit up front. The one guy got to act a little bit like pretending he'd been taken over, but he got no lines. They got no lines. Now we got, oh, there she goes. Bing, 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 bing. But they got no lines. She gets lines. Now she gets bragging rights that she was seen. She was on deck with the main crew and the main cast. Got bragging rights for the rest of her life. And her kids will think she's a hero if they're into sci-fi eventually. But she also gets lines. Now, it's not fair if you're a guy, but if you're a girl, yes, all the females are getting lines. Just saying. So where was I? So she says, it's Ensign McKnight. We're entering the T-Tauri system now, Captain. Data says sensors indicate an energy fluctuation directly in our path. Source unknown. So that's a picture of a fake wormhole. Just thought I'd show that. Okay. And I want to point out that our 2 extras back here, normally all we see are their backs. They're just standing there. But these 2 turn sideways so they can get on camera. Kudos! Good deal. Because I'm telling you, if you watch, these people are not allowed to turn around. But apparently they turn around to look at the screen. I'm just saying. So they show the hole. Worf says picking up an energy distortion but fading. It seems to be gone. A wormhole. They showed it. Very likely, small and extremely unstable wormholes have been mapped near the 39 Atari systems in the last 100 years alone. Riker says, Captain, I suggest we move to a safer location. It could reappear at any moment. Picard says, agreed. Number one, Ensign, take us on a course. And Data says, Captain. And then there's a wormhole. And then they are all knocked unconscious. This is the point where I said we should have gone back to the Dixion Hill part. So they all get knocked unconscious. Just wanted to show that part. Oh, and I would like to still say, and I still don't know why he left after the season started and not at the end of the season. They should have, held that a little longer. I know he regrets it now. He has said so. But I just would like to point out, this is the spot where it says, Will Wheaton starring as Wesley Crusher. It's just a blank space. I'm just paying him in memory of Wesley Crusher. I'm just saying. Till Picard 2, but we don't care about Picard 1 and 2. The only thing that matters is Picard 3. I'm sorry if there are some of you that liked 1 and 2, but I'm telling you the only season that mattered was Picard 3. Period. End. Just saying. Oops. Sorry. So then they all wake up. Data, careful, Captain. The stun effect from the wormhole was relatively severe. Apparently so. How long were we unconscious? 30 seconds. She saw me coming and stopped. I swear it. I'm going to get that clock one day. She doesn't tell time. Has never told time. Well, she did 20 years ago. She died when my mom died. But she still bings. Not as often as, she still bings as often. She just doesn't bing as long. She used to bing like 12, 15. Data says, careful, Captain. The stun effect from the wormhole was relatively severe. Picard says, apparently so. How long were we unconscious? Approximately 30 seconds. I've scanned the ship and detected no life-sustaining injuries among the crew. Picard says, you were not affected? Data says, no. My positronic system is immune to the effect. This is the third unstable wormhole I've passed through during my time in Starfleet. The first was on board USS Tresties, blah, 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 blah. Picard says, thank you, Data. Well, where the hell are we? Riker says, 5.4 parsecs from our previous position. Almost a day's travel in just 30 seconds. Data, sir, I should realign the ship's clock with the Starbase 410 subspace signal to adjust for the time distortion. Picard's like, proceed. Beverly's like, Captain Sickbay here. Picard says, go ahead. Beverly says, I'm getting scattered reports of minor injuries. What happened? Picard says, the Enterprise just jumped through a wormhole. Apparently, we were all unconscious for about 30 seconds. Beverly says, everybody all right up there? Picard says, there's a little and no damage on the bridge, Doctor. Beverly says, acknowledge, Crusher out. Put a hole in my jeans. Acknowledge, Crusher out. Picard says, shift status. Riker says, reports coming in now. Nothing serious so far. Beverly, Geordi says, LaForge here, Captain. I've checked impulse engines and warp drives, so they appear to be unaffected. Worf said shields and weapons are fully functional. Picard says, Counselor, are you all right? Roy says, yes, I think so. I'm feeling a bit confused. It will pass. Picard says, not too bad, all things considered. Riker says, we're lucky we didn't end up halfway across the galaxy and in the middle of next week. Data says that was never a possibility. The wormhole size and extremely short period indicate a relatively local phenomenon. Picard says, there's still the anomalous M-class planet we were going to investigate. Do we go back? So, and again, this is where Data should have cut it off at the head, but no. They go for it and it gets worse. And like I said, they should have, if they were going to backtrack it, they should have backtracked it to a little prior, like what, a half hour prior when he was on the holodeck, and tell Data never to call him on the holodeck or something. No, they got to go through this whole, I know, the plot line, I know. I'm just saying. So, I can't help it. I keep saying it. They just should have went back further. So they talk about the wormhole, and Data's like, the wormhole size in an extremely short period indicate a relatively local phenomenon. Picard says, there's still that anomalous M-class planet we were going to investigate. Do we go back? Data says, the unpredictability of the wormhole would make our investigation a hazardous one. A probe from our current position would be more advisable. Make it so, Picard says. Maybe he shouldn't have even suggested the probe. Maybe they just should have let the whole thing go there. You know, because Data gets in trouble again. I mean, it's just, you know, I have this thing, and I do it a lot. It's just. And then you can put whatever word you want at the end of it. It's just. It's just bad. It's just good. It's just a little kooky. You can put any word you want. It's just. That's my new phrase. It's just. A friend of mine from England gave me a phrase a couple years ago, and I kind of got stuck on it. Cool beans. Don't know what. So then we have a little issue. I have to give Palamini his 5 seconds of. I'm glad he's on the show, but I think this is the only time you see him. So I'm glad we get to see him, and his ligaments around the elbow have been twisted pretty severely. What on earth were you doing when you fell? O'Brien says, hanging a plant for Kiko. It's part of a running project to give me a green thumb. Beverly says, how's it working? O'Brien says, everything I touch seems to turn brown and wither away. Beverly says, Alyssa, would you get me? And she goes, oh, never mind. I'll get it. Don't go. Sister O'Brien, don't go away. Now, if I can do this, if I can show it. I know you Star Trek fans aren't interested. But if I can do this. You see that purple passion over there? And the 2 spark plants that we have there? They were planted, I kid you not, in December of 91. Serious. And they were in the other house, and they were under a skylight. And they would die often. And I would water them, and they would come back to life. Serious. They've been coming and going since 1991. Just a little trivia there on plants. The purple passion, as long as you give it water and sun, it's good. So then we run into an issue here. Okay, so she's treating O'Brien, and she goes to get a medical thing, and she comes in and she sees the plants. Now, I think this lady's a recurring character. I think she stays around for a while. So Beverly goes back to treating O'Brien, and she says, Alyssa, and she goes, yes, doctor. Did you see anybody near the lab today? She says, no, I didn't. Beverly says, you didn't by any chance adjust the environments on the incubation containers. Alyssa says, never touch one of your experiments unless you ask me, doctor. Beverly says, of course, I'm sorry, thank you. Then we go back to the bridge. Oops. So then when we're back on the bridge and we're getting the probe, and Data has fixed the probe, so it says the probe has moved within visual range of the planet. Picard says on screen. Data says sensors indicate a hydrogen-helium composition with a frozen helium core. Riker's like, wait a second, didn't your readings indicate a Class M planet before we went through the wormhole? Data says it's possible that the sensors were affected by interference from the wormhole, Commander. It is clearly not a Class M planet. I just think they should have sold this differently. I just think they should have. So Picard says, Mr. Data, run a full diagnostic to make sure the wormhole didn't permanently damage our senses. He says, aye, sir. Picard says, Ensign, take us on a course. A problem number one. Riker says, it's awfully strange that a malfunctioning sensor would give such a specific reading of a planet. I would have thought that space-time disturbance could cause a lot more confusion than that. Data says it's conceivable that the sensors picked up an after image of an actual planet on the other side of the wormhole. We could survey the nearby stars for such a planet. It would require about 6 weeks. Picard says we don't have the time. We encountered a minor mystery, one that has been solved to my satisfaction. Number one, unless there's a major objection, Ensign McKnight will set us course for Evident-Fodder. Riker says no objection. Picard says Ensign McKnight says aye, sir. So she gets lines. She gets lots of lines. And it's just, there's a lot of issues with this. I'm sorry. I just do. So, again, I'd like to see both people in the room at the same time. I'm just saying. So, Beverly comes to see Picard. She says, I have something of a minor mystery on my hands. Picard says, a minor mystery? That seems to be a recurring phrase around here lately. Oh, Dimidian Scarlet Moss, I didn't know you were an anthobotanist. Beverly says, it's a hobby. Picard says, you've got a good crop going there. As I recall, it's not easy to cultivate. Beverly says, that's just it. I started these spores right before we were all knocked unconscious by the wormhole. You said we were unconscious for 30 seconds. Picard says, correct. Beverly says, then why do these show a full day's growth? Picard says, perhaps you got some sort of fast growth restraint. Beverly says, each of these incubators were set with spores from completely different sources in the Diomedian system. I've got a dozen more back at the lab. Perhaps something extraordinary could have happened to one of them, but not to all of them. Picard says, Doctor, we were not unconscious for a whole day, and yet everything else on board indicates that we were out for 30 seconds. The ship's chronometer, the computer, everything else, including Commander Data. Beverly says, Jean-Luc, I'm telling you, this is over 24 hours of growth. We've got an issue. I'm telling you. If they'd have just turned the clock back just a little bit further. I know, plotline. So then we have a voiceover. Picard says, Commander Data continues to maintain that we were unconscious for only 30 seconds, despite Dr. Crusher's evidence to the contrary. Then they're all in the observation lounge. Picard, Beverly, Data, Geordi, Riker, and Worf. On the table in front of them sits Beverly's incubation bottles. Data says, Captain, I have a hypothesis. The 22nd century physicist Hal Underhill conjectured that a major disruption in time continuity could be compensated by trillions of countless reactions. That effect may have allowed for Dr. Crusher's Moss to arrive at the other side of the wormhole with the unanticipated growth. And Geordi says Underhill was talking about energy. Data says true. Nevertheless, it's possible that phenomenon could occur in matter at much higher levels of organizations, given the proper conditions. Picard says, Thank you, Data. An intriguing hypothesis. Well, perhaps we've got a tempest in a tube after all. Beverly goes, Captain. He cuts her off. Data that he promised Mr. Nelson in engineering that you would assist him on the sensor diagnostic. You'll find him hard at work on deck 36. Data says, as you wish, Captain, and walks out. So then he looks at Geordi after Data leaves and says, do you believe him? And everybody's silent. And Picard goes, I want a frank answer, Commander. Geordi says, not for a second. I'm amazed that he even proposed it. Worf says, what are you suggesting, Captain? Picard says, I'm not sure, Mr. Worf. I've never known Data to lie, and yet. Beverly says, if we never went through a wormhole, then what happened to us during that day? Geordi says, if we were out for a whole day, then why didn't our beards grow? Whatever it was, it seems to be something Data doesn't want to tell us about. Picard says, if it could be whatever caused the situation affect Data, and it could be that he's telling the truth, and this is just a minor mystery. Geordi says, we could always check the computer's chronometer, see if there's any evidence of tampering. Beverly says, a transporter trace analysis might give us another indication of how much time has actually passed. Picard says, Dr. Commander, make it so. Meanwhile, we'll maintain our present course. If there is something wrong with Data, we don't want him to be aware of our suspicions. So Data is helping an engineer, Nelson, with standard sensory diagnostics. Geordi enters. He comes in. He says, gentlemen, how goes the battle? Data says the long-range infrared sensors suffered apparently no ill effects as a result of the wormhole. We are presently checking the neutrino and heavy particle detectors. Geordi says, great, I'll take over, Data. The captain wants you back on the bridge. See you later in 10 forward. Geordi says, Nelson, I need your help with the computer. Beverly goes to see Chief O'Brien. She goes, hello, Chief, how's the elbow? O'Brien says, oh, much better, thanks. This isn't a house call, is it? No, it's not. Tell me, do you remember the last person to use the transporter before we went through the wormhole? And O'Brien checks the computer. And he says, well, let me check. Ensign Lachlan, she's one of my technicians. Beverly says, tell her to report to sickbay immediately. So then they check Ensign Lachlan in sickbay. Beverly says, electrolyte concentration. Alyssa says 12.5 deviation from previous. Beverly says, interesting. Check the cellular membrane. I'm willing to bet the inner turgid pressure is off by almost the same amount. Alyssa says 11.3 deviation from the norm. Beverly says, terrific. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you, Ensign Lachlan. That'll be all for now. Beverly taps her thing and says, Picard, to crush it to Picard. Picard's like, what is it, Doctor? She says, I need to see you immediately. Picard says, I'm on my way to engineering. Join me. So then they're walking in the hallway. They're going to engineering. And Beverly says, electrolyte physiologically, each of us is on a daily cycle. Our cells have developed rhythms based on a 24-hour period. Picard says, our internal clocks. Beverly says, exactly. And I can measure that effect at the molecular level. I took a trace from the last person to use the transporter before the incident and compared her cell function levels at the time to what they are right now. If we were unconscious for 30 seconds, those cycles should be nearly synchronous. And Picard says, and they were? No, we were out for longer than 30 seconds, Captain, a lot longer. So Jordy comes in and he says, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that we were right about the computer's chronometer. There's a security program to prevent tampering, but it looks like now it's been disabled and a new program put in its place. Someone has reset the clock. Picard says, if that's the good news, what is the bad news? Geordi says, Data and I are the only ones on board the ship capable of doing that. Dun 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 dun. Not good. So Picard is in his ready room talking to Data. Data says, it is a mystery, Captain. Picard says, that's an understatement. It is possible that someone or something could affect you without your knowing. Data says, I'm unable to answer that question, sir. Picard says, Data, would you consent to being examined by Commander LaForge? Data says, as you wish, Captain. Picard says, escort Commander Data to engineering. Data says, I know the way. There's a chick in there who's with them. Then there's a voice overview. Captain's log supplemental. It has become clear that everyone aboard the ship has lost an entire day as the mystery of what actually occurred during those missing hours continues to deepen. So do my doubts about Commander Data. You know, we could have all avoided this if we'd gone back an extra few minutes. Sorry. In engineering, we'll start with the higher functions before we get down to basics. Now this won't hurt a bit. Data says, have you forgotten, Jordy, that my sensory inputs are not programmed to experience pain? Jordy says, it's a figure of speech, bedside manner. You know, I'm just trying to make you feel comfortable. Data says, I feel perfectly comfortable. Jordy says, pattern recognition, synesthetic algorithm, heretic functions, all normal. Now, I want to show you this. Wait a second. See if I can get it. So I don't know how well you can see this with my horrible visual. So what do you think? A list of ingredients, a list of weight and measures, his lines, what he's supposed to be saying. So what do you think it really says? I was just curious. Maybe his lines, maybe ingredients, a recipe, a shopping list with prices. I don't know. I was just throwing that out there. And then we go on with Data says, I have noticed, however, that you appear a bit uncomfortable yourself. Jody says, well, it just seems like you're not being completely honest with us, Data. I'm your friend. If something is wrong, I want you to tell me. Maybe I can help. Data says, I cannot tell you anything beyond what I've already stated. Jody's like, okay. So then we go to the bridge. So then he comes off the elevator. He says, excuse us, counselor. And Picard circles the bridge with him as they walk. Captain, I finished examining Data, and Jody says, nothing wrong with the technology that I can see. He's in perfect condition. Picard says, I'm almost hoping you'd find a problem. Jody says, he could still be malfunctioning beyond my ability to detect it. Picard says, this entire mystery started when our senses detected that planet. First, it was an M-class, now it isn't. Riker says, our senses were malfunctioning. Our probe clearly established the planet could not support life. Picard says, Data launched that probe. Riker says, if he rigged it, could you prove it? Jody says he could try. Picard says, what happened to us during that missing day? Surely there must be some clues. Each of us should try and think back to what we were doing just before we blackened out. React if... And Troy faints. You know, I was also thinking that Data could have come clean and just told, like, the bridge crew, just the Picard and Riker and Geordi and Worf. He just could have told them. As long as they didn't go back to that planet, as long as they didn't tell anybody else on the ship, they just kept it to themselves. They didn't make any record of it in the computer. they could have avoided all this. But I know, plot line. I'm just saying. So Deanna almost faints here. Picard says, "Are you all right?" Troy says, "Just a moment, I'm fine." Riker says, "What happened?" Troy said, "I suddenly became dizzy. I think I'd better go to my quarters." Picard says, "Perhaps sickbay would be a better idea." Ah, are you going off again? Lord, like 5 times during this video. So Picard says, "Perhaps sickbay would be a better idea." Troy says, "No, really, I'm all right." Picard says, "Will you see the counselor to her quarters?" Worf says, "Yes, sir." So then Worf walks her to her quarters. And Troy says, "Thank you for coming with me, Mr. Worf." Worf says, "You are well." Troy says, "I just need some rest, thanks." And then she goes in her room, and you hear a scream. So Worf says, "Security override. Override the lock on Counselor Troy's quarters now." And he Worf says, "What's wrong?" Troy says, "The mirror. I came in here and I looked into the mirror. It wasn't me, Worf. It wasn't me. It was my face, but it wasn't me inside." And then Picard comes. Picard says, "Deanna, what happened?" Troy says, "It wasn't what I saw, more what I felt. I looked into the mirror and it seemed a stranger was staring back at me from behind my own eyes, as if my own face was a mask." Geordi's voice comes over the comm. "LaForge to Captain Picard." Picard says, "Yes, Geordi." Geordi says, "I found something." So I guess some time has passed because 5 seconds ago, Beverly was in Deanna's room, but now she's back in sickbay, and Worf has come to see her. Beverly's like, "Lieutenant Worf," and Worf is like, "Doctor." Beverly says, "Can I help you?" Worf says, "Perhaps not." Beverly says, "Worf, you came in here for something." Worf says, "A warrior does not complain about physical discomfort, but the captain ordered us to report anything out of the ordinary." Beverly says, "Are you in pain? How did this happen?" She's examining his wrist. Oh, it's so hard to get all 3 of them in the picture. I'm not gonna. I should have wrote it down when I did it the first time. So they're in Data's quarters, and they're showing Data a planet on screen. Picard says, "Do you recognize the planet, Data?" Data says, "Yes, sir. It's the planet our probe detected to the T-Turi system." Geordi says, "No, it's not. Actually, it's Tetis 3. I retrieved the image from the ship's library. It's a geophysical figure. Have image from the ship's library have been slightly altered, but it's definitely Tetis 3. Because it's strange that an obscure planet several hundred light years from here should be picked up by our probe." Picard says, "Data, did you take this image from the ship's library and then program the probe to send it back to us?" Data says, "I cannot verify that hypothesis." Picard says, "But you don't deny it." Data's like, "No, sir." Picard says, "Mr. LaForge, will you send another probe to the T-Turi system?" Geordi says, "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Data." Picard says, "Counselor Troy just had a very disturbing hallucination." Data says, "Is she all right, sir?" Picard said, "For the moment, can you tell me if Diana's incident is in any way related to the missing time period?" Data says, "No, sir, I cannot." Picard says, "Data, you are the key to this entire mystery, and you've done nothing but block my every attempt to solve it. Why are you fighting me?" Data says, "It's not my choice." Picard said, "What do you mean by that?" Data says, "I cannot say." Picard said, "You would rather endanger Diana, a friend and colleague, than tell me what is going on." Data says, "What would you place first, the welfare of a single individual or that of the entire crew?" Now, I'm going to go off again a little here because he's alone with the captain now. Geordi left. He could tell the captain in private, in confidence, "Yeah, something happened, but circumstances led you to order me not to tell or reveal." and I'm going to follow your orders and not reveal. He could have said something along those lines, but he didn't. And because he didn't, and because of all this mystery stuff, Picard keeps pursuing it. And I want to tell you that I was thinking of the Wrath of Khan. And you're saying to yourself, what does the Wrath of Khan have to do with this particular moment? Well, in my little brain, I feel the Wrath of Khan here, where Spock is in that tube thingy with the radiation, and he's been exposed and he's dying, and he tells Kirk that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. That's why I'm saying this reminds me of that moment that Data is trying to convey this information. Picard says, are you saying that by not cooperating you are actually protecting us? I'm not saying that at all. I merely state a possible alternate explanation. Yeah, Data, you should have said you're protecting them and you need to keep quiet. Or, yes, I'm keeping quiet because you ordered me not to reveal anything. I'm trying to save the lives of... And just, I know, plot line, but I'm serious. Any number of explanations could have cut this short, but no! We had to really nail Data's coffin, didn't we? Because it's then, Mr. Data, I'm going to ask you again, and I order you to directly answer me. What really happened to us? Data says, I can not answer that, Captain. Picard says, what would you have me do, Data? How would you handle this if our positions were revealed? I am apparently guilty of falsifying the ship's records, of interfering with an investigation, of disobeying a direct order from my commanding officer. Your duty seems clear, sir. Picard says, do you know what a court-martial would mean? Your career in Starfleet would be finished. Data says, I realize that. Picard says, do you also realize that you would also likely be stripped down to the wires to find out what the hell has gone wrong, sir? Yes, sir, I do. And again, if he had thought of some other hypothesis, look, yes, something happened, but I'm not allowed to tell you, because if I tell you, your lives will be endangered, and you ordered me not to tell you, and I'm only following your orders, Captain, something along those lines, and not reveal what happened. But it just, I know, plot line. My neck's getting a little squinched here. But, they could have handled this other, I know, plot line. All right, 1 second. So then we're back in his ready room. Beverly says the wrist has been broken, reset, and treated with one of our subcutaneous bone fusion units. Picard says during the missing day. Beverly says that's the only possibility. Picard says, are you suggesting he was conscious? Beverly says, I'm suggesting maybe we all were. I certainly didn't repair a broken wrist while I was unconscious. Picard says, our memories of that day. Beverly says, blocked, possibly erased. By whom? Worf says there are very few individuals on board who could have broken my wrist. Commander Data is one of those individuals. But we find out later it wasn't Data. Picard says, I can't accept that explanation. Well, he does possess the speed and strength. Picard says, granted. I'm beginning to suspect that Commander Data is refusing to cooperate because he believes he's acting in the best interest of the Enterprise. Geordi's voice comes over the intercom. LaForge to Captain Picard. Picard says, yes, Geordi. He says, our probe's approaching the planet, sir. Picard says, acknowledged. Maybe we'll get some answers. Geordi says, visuals available now, Captain. Riker says, M-class, nickel ion core, nitrogen, oxygen atmosphere. The same planet our sensors picked up before the so-called wormhole. Riker says, affirmative. Geordi says, no indication of any space-time distortion whatsoever. The probe should at least be detecting a residual effect, even if the wormhole is inactive. Picard says, that's because there was no wormhole. There never was. But Riker says, sir, Picard says it was a ruse to throw us off the track. Look at the clues. Dr. Crusher's incubation experiment, the computer, the clock, the transporter trace, all indicate the existence of a missing day. Lieutenant Worf's broken wrist seems to suggest that we may have been awake and aware for that day, possibly in a struggle for our lives. Beverly says that fact that we're alive suggests we might have won. Picard says not necessarily, Doctor. Is that the 5th time she's gone off? I'm going to make her part of my video. David's behavior would seem to suggest that we did not. Why else would he be willing to sacrifice his career rather than tell us the truth? Worf says, but if we didn't win and we didn't lose, Picard says the only alternative left is a stalemate. Maybe a compromise was reached, a compromise that could have forced Data into this silence. Riker says, but by uncovering all of this, we are in danger of upsetting the stalemate. Maybe we should leave well enough alone. Possibly number one, I would be prepared to live with a mystery, but Data's role in this must be ascertained or he'll never be trusted with Starfleet duty again. I cannot live with that. Because his ensign take us back to the scene of the crime, T-Turry system warp 2. See, now this is where they screw up again. If Data had come through and said, look, yeah, you're right, but we can't talk about it, we can never reveal it, it's got to be, but no. So we got to go through all this again. So the alien comes back one more time and possesses Troy one more time. Then she goes to Data. Data's like, Counselor Troy, what is it? And Troy says, the plan has failed. Data says, you've returned. Troy says, your ship is again in our space. Data says, I was unable to prevent this. Troy said, nevertheless, you are here. Data says, the Enterprise is not a threat to you. Give me more time. Our destruction would only... Geordi walks in. Data, the captain wanted me to bring you to the bridge. Counselor, one moment if you would. Data says, do nothing. It may yet be possible to salvage the situation. So, Data reports his bridge is ordered, Captain. Picard says, well, Data, as you can see, we're back where this all started. Data says, we must leave immediately, sir. Picard says, why? Any further delay will put all of our lives at risk. Picard says, why? What is the source of the risk? The energy field? Data says, I cannot say. Picard says, Data, you sound like you're stuck in a flashback loop. Certainly you can say. You have free will. You have a choice. My silence is not by choice, sir. Picard says, not by choice. Are you somehow controlled by that force? Did Geordi miss something when he examined you? Data says, Geordi's examination was exemplary. Picard says, then why are you still compelled to disobey my orders? Now, during the missing day, were you contacted by Starfleet? Did they order you to conceal the truth from us? Data says, I cannot answer that. We must leave, sir. Picard says, this ship is not going anywhere until I get an answer. Now, who gave you this order? Data says, you did, sir. And that energy field is coming back at them. The energy field is shifting amplitude, trying to match the shield. Data says the energy field will eventually penetrate our shield, sir. There's no way to counter the Paxians' technology. We can delay their takeover. We can not prevent it. Because as the Paxians, who are they? Troy comes in. You have invaded our system. Picard says, Worf, no. Because he goes to Troy. Data says, you have only harmed Counselor Troy's body. Because we are not invaders, we are explorers. Troy says, your knowledge of us is unacceptable. Data says, they are xenoforms, sir, in isolationists. The Paxians terraformed a proto-planet in this system in order to better conceal their whereabouts. The apparent wormhole we experience is actually a trap designed to keep out invaders. The energy field stuns everyone on board the ship, the invading vessel, and then places them in a state of biochemical stasis. Geordi says, well, that explains why our beards didn't grow. Data says, then the Paxians take the ship out of their territory. Riker says, so the crew wakes up and thinks they've been through a wormhole. They count their blessings and keep going. Data says, precisely. Picard says, what went wrong this time? Data says, my positronic brain is a technology unknown to the Paxians. Troy says, our stun field had no effect on him. He remained conscious as we attempted to take over your ship. Data says, when I realized the crew was incapacitated, I initiated emergency procedures. And then we do some flashbacking. Data says, initiated emergency procedures, computer engaged emergency plan ZZ Alpha. Computer says, automatic defense procedures initiated, energy field strength increasing, warning shield penetration 17%. Data says, computer begin random fluctuation of field frequency and modulation. Computer says, executed. His data says, with the Enterprise template protected, I revived the crew. Computer released compound ADTH into the air flow system. He removes the crew. Immediately, the crew begins to revive. Data helps Picard to his feet. The crew shrugs off the effects of the stun system and resume their post. Picard says, status, the energy field is attempting to match shield fluctuations, sir. Options, Mr. Worf. I do not recommend weapons at this range. Picard said, can we go to warp? Negative. This field is also acting as a tractor beam. Computer says, warning, shields have been penetrated. Worf says, all systems frozen, Captain. Data says, the Paxtons can manipulate energy structures on many levels. They took control of the Council's body to communicate with us. Worf says, Captain. Picard says, no, stop everyone. Who are you? Troy says, you know of our existence. Our attempt to place you in a biochemical status has failed. We have no choice but to destroy this ship. Because if we destroy this ship, others will come searching for us. You may not be able to stop them all. Our knowledge of your civilization will be spread across half the galaxy. Troy says, no. Because says, allow us safe passage and I will protect your right to privacy to the best of my ability. We will never tell anyone of your existence. Troy says, there were over 1,000 life forms on this vessel. How can you be so sure of their silence? Picard says, the biochemical stasis, does it suppress synaptic functions? It does. Then you have the capability of affecting memory. Could you erase the short-term memory of everyone on the ship? Remove all knowledge of this event. Allow us to proceed as though it never happened. Now, again, I'm saying if they'd gone back to the point where he was on the holodeck with Guinan, they wouldn't have had all these problems. Just saying. It would take time, one of your days. He is immune to our influence. Data says, Picard says, Data, I'm going to give you a most unusual order. I'm not quite sure that you will be able to integrate it into your program. We did this already. He ordered Data already. Duh, we've been through all of this. It's a rerun. I'm going to give you a most unusual order. I'm not quite sure that you will be able to integrate it into your program. As a Starfleet officer, I'm required to follow all your orders, Captain. Good, because our survival depends upon it. I'm ordering you never to reveal what has happened here today. Not to Starfleet, not even to myself. You will conceal your memory of the Paxtons for as long as you exist. Is that understood? Data says completely. Now, they did this the first time. Picard says satisfactory. Troy says agreed. Picard says excellent. Now our task is to eliminate from the ship's records any information that might lead to knowledge of this incident. Let's go to work. Data, we proceed to erase all evidence of our encounter with the Praxtons. I reset the computer chronometer, and again the crew was stunned again, indignant, cautious, and the short-term memories erased. When they revived a day later, the computer adjustments made it appear that only 30 seconds had passed. And here we are again. Grace says, here we are again. So wait a minute. She agreed, and now she's disagreeing. You see? They could have brought up the fact that they did this already. It's a rerun. I'm having deja vu. Because she's like, the plan failed. The ship must be destroyed. Because it was like, no, wait. He said the plan failed because clues were left behind that suggested a mystery. Too many humans. A mystery is irresistible. Dr. Crusher's incubation experiment, Wasp is Troy's hallucinations, little pieces of evidence that suggested even more clues. The clock, the transporter trace, Data's odd behavior. If we eliminate all these clues and begin again, Picard says yes. The first time a run-through, a rehearsal to shake out the flaws. The second time we'll succeed if we leave out no clue. Troy says you are most unusual race, a species, worthy of our second chance. Proceed. And then Diana comes back, and they go through it all over again. So we go through the whole thing all over again. So they redo everything, and then they're unconscious again. And Picard's like, "What happened, Data?" And Data's like, "The effect from the wormhole was rather intense." Picard says, "So it would seem." Data says, everyone but myself remain unconscious. My positronic brain is immune to the effect. Picard says, how long are we out? Data says 30 seconds. Riker says, current position. McKnight says, 5-4 parsecs from our previous position, bearing 285 Mark 147. Picard said it could be worse. Data says, yes, sir, the wormhole appears to have been a local phenomenon. Beverly's voice comes over the comm. What happened? Picard says, the Enterprise went through a wormhole, Doctor. It seems the entire crew was unconscious for 30 seconds. Beverly said, is everyone all right on the bridge? Picard says, apparently not. I'm checking. Other decks. Pressure out. Picard says, status reports. Warship shields and weapons unaffected. Riker says, no damage to engineering. Counselor? Troy says, there's a general feeling of disorientation on board, but there's nothing serious as far as I can tell. Picard says, well, there's still an anomalous M-class planet to investigate. We're going to investigate. Ensign Platypus. Data interrupts and says, it's likely the anomalous readings were the result of the wormhole's effect. It's extremely unstable. I would recommend against returning. And they don't. And that's the end of the episode. And that's the end of it. And I'm over it. I'm ready for First Contact. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you enjoyed my rants. And I can't wait. This was the end of the Clues episode, Disc 4, Season 4, 188, I believe. Oh, and there she goes again. So, we've done 187. We've done 188 today. Next week, we're doing the big one. This should take a while. This will be a long one. This is going to be a fun one. First Contact. We got Borg. We got Cochrane. We got the Vulcans. We got so much to do. It's going to be a long one. Then we've got Galaxy's Child. This is going to be a fun season. So please check it out with me next week. Remember, Friday's Star Trek Day. Go back and check all the previous seasons. That would be really nice. Remember my wish for a miracle for Christmas of likes and subscribes, 1,000. That'd be awesome. That'd be very generous of you. It doesn't cost you anything. And I would most appreciative. Have a good day. Thank you.